The Bhagavat Gita, Cantos 13 to 18, Synopsis. The 13th canto is called the Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga, namely the yoga of discrimination between the field and the knower of the field. Here, the path of knowledge has been elucidated further. In this context, two important terms are used as regards the human beings. One is the term Kshetra and the other is the term Kshetrajna. Kshetra means the field and Kshetrajna is the one who understands the nature of this field. The Kshetra is the body and the Kshetrajna is the soul. They are entirely different. The Kshetra is material, transitory and perishable. But Kshetrajna, namely the knower of the Kshetra, is the eternal and imperishable consciousness. It is the spirit of the Almighty, the individual soul, which is the Kshetrajna. A person who knows that the body is not the soul is a Kshetrajna. This knowledge of the difference between the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna is the true knowledge. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetram yit abhidhiyate yetadyo vettitam prahu kshetrajna iti tadvidah kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam yattad jnanam matam mama. Krishna then gives a detailed analysis of these two aspects of human existence. He starts by enumerating the material elements that encompass the Kshetra, which is the field of the human body. They are 1. The subtle states of the 5 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air and space. 2. The 5 objects of perception, namely sound, touch, color, taste and smell. 3. The ego. 4. The 10 organs of perception and action. 5. The mind. 6. The intellect. 7. The unmanifest primordial matter. 8. The physical body. 9. The consciousness. 10. The feelings like desire, aversion, pleasure, pain and firmness. These constitute the nature of the Kshetra and those that emerge from the Kshetra. The virtues and pious good qualities purify the field and illuminate it with knowledge. This knowledge helps us to realize and understand the existence of a soul, which is the Kshetrajna or the knower of the field. Mahabhutanyahangkaro buddhihi avyaktamevacha indriyani dashaikam cha panchachendriyagocharaah ichchadvesha sukham dukkam sanghadas chetanadhritihi yadarkshetram samasena savikaram udahritam. Then he enumerates many traits and moral virtues like absence of pride, tolerance, devotion to God, etc., which help for the realization of the truth. He says that all this is knowledge, and what is other than this is ignorance. Adhyatma jnana nityatvam tattva jnanartha darshanam etajnanamiti proktam ajnanam yatadonyatha. Thereafter, he tells the nature of the Supreme Brahman, which ought to be known, and knowing which one attains supreme bliss. The Supreme Brahman is the Lord of beginningless entities. It pervades the entire universe. It is the sustainer of all. It exists within as well as without of all beings. It constitutes both the animate and inanimate creation. It is the light of all lights and entirely beyond Maya. It is knowledge worth knowing and worth attaining through wisdom. And it is abiding in the heart of all. Jyotisham api tajyotihi tamasaha paramuchyate jnanam jneyam jnanagamyam hridi sarvasya vishthitam. Then he elaborates on the concepts of Prakriti and Purusha. Both are without beginning. Purusha is the consciousness or the spirit. Prakriti is the divine power of Purusha. Prakriti is the cause of the creation of the body and the sense organs, while the Purusha is the cause of the experience of happiness and suffering. All modifications, such as likes and dislikes, are born of Prakriti. Both are the manifestations of Brahman, the Supreme Self. Purusha embodied in Prakriti is the Jiva. The Jiva experiences the results of actions arising out of the three gunas which are born of Prakriti. As a consequence of the results of these actions, the Jiva takes birth in favorable or unfavorable environments. In other words, nature creates the activity in the body that makes up existence and all its experiences. A wise person knows that the self is ultimately separate from nature and the body. Such a person is never born again, whatever be the mode of his life. Yayevam vetti purusham prakritim cha gunais sah sarvatha artamanopi nasa bhujo bhijajate. Krishna then tells the method of God realization. Some, by meditation, behold the Supreme Spirit in the heart with the help of their intellect. Some others realize it through the discipline of knowledge. Some others see it through the discipline of action, namely the Karma Yoga. Other dull-witted persons, not knowing thus, worship by hearing from others. And even those people will be able to cross the ocean of mundane existence and go beyond death. He points out again that whatever being is born, whether it is moving or unmoving, has emanated through the union of the kshetra, the matter, and the kshetrajna, the spirit. Yavat sanjayate kinchit sattvam sthavara jangamam kshetra kshetrajna samyogat tadvidhi bharatarshabha. So he says that a person who sees the Supreme Lord abiding equally in all animate and inanimate beings, the imperishable amidst the perishable, is the one who really sees. He who sees that all actions are performed in every way only by Prakriti, and likewise sees the self as the non-doer, he alone really sees. The moment one perceives the diversified existence of beings as abiding in Prakriti and the spreading forth of all beings from the same, that very moment he attains the Almighty Brahman. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatsva vinashyantam yah pashyati sa pashyati samam pashyanya sarvatra samavasthitamishwaram nahinasthyatmanatmanam tato yati parangatim prakrityaiva cha karmani kriyamanani sarvashah yah pashyati tata atmanam akartaram sapashyati yada bhuta pratakbhavam ekastamanupashyati tataye vacha vistaram brahma sampadyate tada. He concludes by saying that those who thus perceive with the eye of wisdom the difference between the kshetra and the kshetrajna and the phenomena of liberation from Prakriti reach the Supreme Eternal Spirit. Kshetra kshetrajnayorevam antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakriti moksham cha ye viduryanti te param. The 14th canto is known as Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, namely the yoga of the division of the three gunas. Krishna continues and states that the evolution of all beings takes place from the union of Prakriti and Purusha. He explains that nature is the womb, and in that womb he places the germ of life. All beings come forth from the combination of the two. He says, of all beings that appear in the species of various kinds, Prakriti is the conceiving mother, and I am the seed-giving father. Mamayonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadham yaham sambhavas sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata sarvayonishu kaunteya murtayas sambhavanti yah tasam brahma mahadyonihi aham bija pradapita. He then declares that the three gunas, namely sattva, rajas and tamas, born of nature, are the cause of bondage of the jivatma, the embodied soul. He then discusses the nature of the three gunas and the way in which they bind the jivatma. Sattva, being immaculate, is luminous and flawless. It binds the embodied soul through attachment to happiness and knowledge. Rajas is the nature of passion. It is born of desire and attachment. It binds the soul through attachment to actions and their fruit. Tamas is the deluder of all those who look upon the body as their own self. It is born of ignorance. It binds the soul through error, laziness, and sleep. Sattvam rajas tamayiti guna prakriti sambhava nibhagnanti mahabaho dehe dehinamavyayam tatra sattvam nirmalatvat prakashakamanāmayam sukasangena badhnāti jnānasangena chānagha rajoragatmagam vidhi trishna sangasamudbhavam tannibhagnāti kaunteya karma sangena dehinam tamastvajñānajam vidhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramādalasya nidhrābhihi tannibhagnāti bharata. Of the three, sattva has the power to uplift a person and lead to enlightenment because it is connected to wisdom. When rajas predominates, the qualities of greed, activity, restlessness, etc. prevail. With the growth of tamas, foolishness, inactivity, delusion, etc. appear. The guna that rules a person when he dies will dictate the type of rebirth he will enter. When the enlightened person sees no one as the doer other than the three gunas, he knows that which is beyond the gunas and he enters into the realm of God. He will then be able to transcend these three gunas, which are the cause of this body. Having been freed from birth, death, old age and misery, the soul of that person attains immortality and supreme bliss. Nanyam gunebhya kartaram yada drashtanupashyati gunebhyascha param vetti madbhavam sodhigacchati gunaneta natityatrīn dehi dehasamudbhavan janma mrityu jara dukkhaihi vimukto mrutamashnute. Arjuna then asks, what are the marks of him who has risen above the three gunas, and what is his conduct? And how does he transcend the three gunas? Krishna replies, saying that the person who has risen above the three gunas is unattached and responds equally to sorrow or joy. He remains established in identity with God and never falls off from that state. To him, a clod of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold are all of equal worth. He is equipoised in honour or dishonour. He is allied towards a friend or an enemy, and has renounced the sense of doership in all undertakings. Sama dukkha sukha swastha samaloshtasmakanchana tulya priya priyo dhiraha tulya nindatmasamstutihi manapamanayostulyah tulyo mitraripakshayoh sarvarambha parityaji gunatitas sauchyate. He concludes by saying, he who constantly worships me through the yoga of exclusive devotion, transcending these three gunas, becomes eligible for attaining Brahman. Because I am the embodiment of the imperishable Brahman, of immortality, of the eternal Dharma, and of absolute bliss. Mamchayo abhicharena bhaktiyo jena sevate sagunan samatityetan brahma bhujaya kalpate brahmano hi pratisthaham amrutasya vyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukasya kantikasya cha. The 15th canto is called the Purushottama Yoga, namely the Yoga of Supreme Person. Here, the virtues, glory, and the essential character of the Supreme Person, that is, the Almighty God, is discussed. Mentioning the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna, it is stated that God is superior to both the perishable and the imperishable. That is why he is known as Purushottama, the Supreme Person. The universe is metaphorically referred to as the Aswatha tree. This tree, in the form of creation, has sprung and grown from the primeval being, namely God. All the worlds and the bodies of living beings are evolved from this tree as branches. It is from the gunas that all the worlds and the living beings are evolved. Thus, its branches are nurtured by the gunas, and its roots bind the embodied soul according to its actions in the human body. Declaring that the beginning or end or even a stability of this tree of the universe are not actually perceived, Krishna tells that it has to be felled with the sharp-edged axe of detachment. Thereafter, one should diligently meditate on that Supreme Person and seek for that Supreme State, reaching which he does not return to this material world. Narupamasyeha tato palabhyate nanto nachadir nachasam pratishtha ashwattamenam suvirudhamulam asanga shastrena dridhena chitva tatah padam tat परिमार्गितव्यम् यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूयः तमेव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये यतः प्रवृत्ति प्रसुता पुराणी. Krishna then details the marks of those who reach that supreme state. They are free from pride and delusion. They overcome the evil of attachment. They are ever devoted to spiritual pursuits. Their cravings have completely ceased. They are completely immune from all pairs of opposites like pleasure and pain. And they are free from delusion. Nirmana moha Gita-Synopsis-Cantos Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama Dvandair vimukta sukha dukkha sanyaihi gacchantya mudha padamavyayam tat. What is that supreme state? It is the one where neither the sun nor the moon nor fire can illumine that supreme self-effulgent state, attaining to which a person never returns to this world. Na tad bhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavakah yadgatva na nivartante tadhama paramam mama. Krishna then tells about the nature of the jiva, the embodied soul, how it migrates, how it enjoys worldly pleasures, and how only the wise understand it. The eternal jivatma in this body is a fragment of the primeval being. And it is that alone which draws around itself the mind and the five senses. The jivatma leaves the body and transmigrates to another body after death. Just as the breeze carries the odors from their seat, so too the jivatma takes the mind and the senses from the body during this process of transmigration and takes them to the new body which it acquires. This jivatma enjoys the objects of the senses. The deluded persons do not know the soul departing from the body or residing in the body or enjoying the objects of senses. Only those endowed with the eyes of wisdom are able to realize it. And people who have self-discipline and follow the path of yoga recognize the Almighty in themselves. Mamaivamsho jivaloke jivabhutas sanatana manassashtani indriyani prakritisthani karshati shariram yadavapnoti yachapyutkramati ishvaraha gृहीत्वैतानि संयाति वायुर्गन्धानि वाशयात् श्रोत्रं चक्षुस्पर्शनं च रसनं घ्राणमेव च अधिष्ठाय मनश्चायं विषयानुपसेवते उत्क्रामन्तं स्थितं वापि भुञ्जानं वा गुणान्वितं विमूढानानुपश्यन्ति पश्यन्ति ज्ञानचक्षुषः यतन्तो योगिनश्चैनं पश्यन्त्यात्मन्यवस्थितं यतन्तोऽप्यगतात्मानो nainam pashyantyachetasah. Continuing with the aspect of the glory of the Supreme Person, Krishna says that the Purusha is of two kinds. One is the bodies of all beings which are perishable. The other is the Jivatma, or the embodied soul, which is imperishable. Dvavimau purushau loke ksharascha eva cha ksharas sarvani bhutani kutastho kshara uchyate. But the Supreme Person is other than these two. That Supreme Person encompasses all the three worlds and upholds and maintains all. He is the imperishable Lord and the Supreme Spirit. Pointing out that He is that Supreme Person, Krishna says that since He is wholly beyond the perishable world of matter and superior even to the Jivatma, which is imperishable embodied soul, He is known as Purushottama, the Supreme Self. The undeluded wise person knows the Supreme Person, worships that Supreme Person in all respects, and becomes all-knowing. Uttama Purushastvanyah Paramatmetyudahritah Yo Lokatrayamavishya Bibartvavyaya Ishvarah Yasmat Ksharamati Aksharaadapi chottamah atosmi loke vedecha prasita purushottamah yomam evamasam mudho janati purushottamam sasarvavid bhajati mam sarvabhavena bharata. The 16th canto is called the Daivasura Sampat Vibhaga Yoga, namely the yoga of division between the divine and demonical properties. Krishna describes the characteristics of the wise persons against those with demonic features. The divine traits are those of the enlightened person or the person with the potential to become a sage. These traits include fearlessness, purity of mind, steadfastness in the yoga of knowledge, charity, control of the senses, etc. Abhayam sattva samshuddhihi jnana yoga vyavasthitihi Danam damascha yajñascha swadhyayastapa arjavam ahimsa satyamakrodaha tyagashantirapaisunam daya bhuteshvalo luptvam mardavam hrirachapalam tejakshama shaucham adroho natimanita bhavanti sampadam devim abhijatasya bharata. Then he indicates a few marks of those with demonic properties. They are hypocrisy, arrogance and pride, anger, rudeness, and ignorance. Dambho darpo bhimanascha krodha parushyameva cha ajnanam cha bhijatasya partha sampadamasurim. The divine properties lead to liberation and the demoniac properties lead to bondage. Consoling Arjuna as one born with the divine propensities, Krishna says that there are only two types of men in this world. The one possessing the divine nature and the other possessing a demoniac disposition. Daivi sampat vimokshaja nibandhaya surimata masuchas sampadam daivim abhijatosi pandava dvabhuta sargau lokesminne daiva asurajevacha daivo vistarasha prokta asuram parthame shunu. And Krishna goes on to point out in detail about the type of people possessing demoniac disposition. Among other things, he points out that they will say that this world is without any truth, without any foundation, and without God. Cherishing insatiable desires and embracing false views through ignorance, these deluded men of impure conduct move in this world with hypocrisy, pride, and arrogance. They give themselves up to innumerable cares, ending only with death. Gratification of sensual enjoyment is their only aim. They are positive in their belief that this is the highest limit of joy. Pravrittim cha nivrittim cha janana vidurasuraha na shaucham napi cha acharu na satyam teshu vidyate asatyam apratishtham te jagadahuranishwaram aparaspara sambhutam kimanyat kamahaitukam etam drishtimavashtabhya nashtatmanolpabuddhaya prabhavantyugra karmanaha kshayaya jagato hitaha kamamashritya dushpuram dambhamanamadhanvitaha mohad grihitva sadgrahan pravartante suchivrataha chintama parimeyam cha prayantam upashritaha kamopabhoga parama etavaditi nishchitaha. Thus, deluded by ignorance and addicted to the gratification of sensual pleasures, these men fall into the foulest hell. Failing to reach God, they are born life after life in demoniacal wombs and then sink down to still lower conditions. Asurim yonim apanna mudha janmani janmani mama prapyaiva kaunteya tato yantyadhamam gatim. Desire, anger and greed are the triple gates of hell. They bring about the downfall of a person. Therefore, every person should shun all these three. The person who gets rid of these three gates of hell practices what is good for himself and thereby attain the supreme goal. Trividham naragasyedam dvaram nasanamatmanah kama krodasthatha lobha tasmat edatrayam tyajet yetair mukta kaunteya tamodvaraisthribhirnarah acharatyatmanah shreyah tato yati param gatim. Discarding the injunctions of the scriptures, he who acts in an arbitrary way according to his own sweet will neither attains perfection, nor happiness, nor the supreme goal. So, scripture should be the guide in determining what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. Yashastra vidhimutsrujya vartate kamakaratah na sasiddhim avapnoti na sukham na param gatim tasmat shastram pramanam te karya vyavasthitau ज्ञात्वा शास्त्र विधानोक्तं कर्म कर्तुं विहार्हसि. The 17th canto is called as the Shraddha Traya Vibhaga Yoga, namely the yoga of the division of the threefold faith. Arjuna asks a question now as to which guna prevails in persons who worship with faith but reject the scriptures. To this query of Arjuna, Krishna says that the faith of all embodied beings conforms to their natural mental disposition. Their natural faith is of three kinds: Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. Those of Sattvic disposition worship gods. Those of Rajasic temperament worship the demigods, namely the demons. And those of a Tamasic disposition worship the ghosts and the spirits of the dead. Trividha bhavati shraddha dehinam sa svabhavaja satviki rajasi chaiva tamasi chetitam shrunu sattvanurupa sarvasya shraddha bhavati bharata shraddhamayoyam purushaha yo yash Shruddha Sajevasah Yajante Satvika Devane Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasah Pretan Bhutaganamschanye Yajante Tamasa Janah. The intake of food also differs between different persons according to their innate disposition and is of three kinds of Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. Same is the case with the qualities of sacrifice, worship and charity. Krishna then explains the disposition of persons on each of these items of food, sacrifice, worship and charity. Aharas tvapi sarvasya trividho bhavati priyah yajnas tapas tatha adanam tesham bhedamimam shrunu. Sattvic foods are fresh and succulent. They provide vitality. Rajasic foods are bitter, salty, sour or pungent. They cause discomfort. Tamasic foods are bland, stale, overcooked and contaminated. Control of the body, mind and speech practiced with faith is sattvic. There is no desire for an outcome in that practice. Rajasic control comes from pride. This is done in order to gain a respect or admiration. Tamasic control is used to harm others or to gain power over others. Worship done according to scriptures only for the sake of worship is sattvic. Worship done out of desire is rajasic. Worship done without faith is tamasic. Charity given for his own sake is sattvic. Rajasic charity is half-hearted and is given with selfish motive. Charity given disrespectfully at the wrong place or time is tamasic. Thus, Krishna explained as to how the sattvic type of sacrifice, austerity, etc. are worth practicing. Then he shows the connection they have with God and how a flaw or defect in the practice of sattvika can be set right. In this context, he explains the importance of the mantra Om Tat Sat. Brahman is truth, consciousness and bliss. Om Tat Sat. This is considered to be the threefold appellation of Brahman. Acts of sacrifice, charity and austerity, as per the instructions of the sacred scriptures, are always commenced with the invocation of the divine word Om. Tat is the appellation that indicates that all things belongs to God. Uttering the divine word Tat, the various acts of sacrifice, austerity and charity are performed by the seekers of liberation without aiming at their fruits. Sat is used in the sense of reality and goodness. It is also used in the sense of a praiseworthy, auspicious action. Om Tat Sat iti nirdesho brahmanas sprutah brahmanastena vedascha yajñascha vihita pura tasmat omityudahritya yajñadana tapakriyah pravartante vidhanoktaha satatam brahmavadinam tat ityanabhisandhaya phalam yajñatapakriyah danakriyascha vividaha kriyante mokshakankshibih sadbhave sadhubhave cha sadityetat prayujyate prashaste karmani tatha sashabda parthayujyate yajñe tapasidane cha sthitis saditi sochyate karma chaiva tadarthiyam sadityeva bhidiyate. Indicating the importance of faith, Krishna says that if worship, control or charity are done without faith, they are referred to as asat or unreal. They do not fructify either here or hereafter. Ashraddhaya hyutam dattam tapastaptam kritam chayat asadityuchyate partha nachatat pretya no iha. The 18th and final canto is called the Moksha Sannyasa Yoga, namely the yoga of liberation through the path of knowledge and self-surrender. Here, Krishna talks about the terms sannyasa and tyaga. Sannyasa can be translated broadly as a renunciation and tyaga as a relinquishment. Krishna makes a distinction between the concept of sannyasa and tyaga. Sannyasa is the giving up of all actions motivated by desire. Tyaga consists in relinquishing the fruits of all actions. Some wise persons, however, declare that all actions contain a measure of evil and are therefore worth giving up altogether. But some other wise persons say that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. Therefore, although the embodied beings cannot completely relinquish action, they must relinquish the results of action. Kamyanam karmanam nyasam sannyasam kavayo viduh sarvakarma phalatyagam prahustyagam vichakshana tyajyam doshavadityeke karma prahul manishina yajnatane tapakarma natyajyamiti chapare. Krishna then proceeds to pronounce his observations on tyaga. He says that tyaga is of three kinds: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Though action leads to bondage, action cannot be entirely given up by anyone possessing a body. Further, it is not advisable to abandon a prescribed duty. Doing one's prescribed duty involves an action. Acts of sacrifice, charity, penance, and all other acts of duty are purifiers and must therefore be performed. A prescribed duty is to be performed simply because it has to be performed. There should be no attachment towards that action, nor the expectation of the fruits thereof. Such a type of relinquishment is sattvic in nature. If a person gives up his duties for fear of physical strain, thinking that all actions are really painful, then it is rajasic in character and it cannot be called as relinquishment. Such abandonment of duties through ignorance is tamasic in character. There are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all actions. These are the physical body, the agent, the sensory organs, behaviors, and above all, the divine providence. Persons of limited understanding fail to recognize these 5 elements of action and consider themselves as the sole agent of an action. Panchaitani mahabaho karanani nibodhame sankhye krutante proktani siddhaye sarvakarmanam adhishthanam tata karta karanam cha pratak vidham vividhascha pratak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam shariravaṅ manobhiryate karma prarabhate narah nyāyam va viparitam va panchaite tasya hetavah tatraivam sati kartaram atmanam kevalam tuyah pashyatya kritabuddhitvan nasa pashyati durmatihi. There is a threefold impulse to motivate any action. They are the instrument of action, the object, and the doer. Conceptually, it is knowledge, the knowable, and the knower. Krishna divides these three again under the three heads sattva, rajas and tamas. Jnanam jneyam parijñāta trividha karma chodana karanam karma karteti trividha karma sangraha jnanam karma ca karta ca tridhaiva gunabhedatah prochyate gunasankhyaane yatavash shrunutānyapi. Sattvic knowledge is one where a person perceives one imperishable divine existence as undivided and equally present in all individual beings. The notion of being separate is relinquished. Knowledge that perceives the world as consisting of separate and disconnected individual beings is rajasic. Tamasic knowledge is one where a person clings to his body as if it is the whole. That person has no real grasp of the truth. Sarvabhuteshu enaikam bhavam avyayamikshate avibhaktam vibhakteshu tajñānam viddhi sattvikam pratatvena tu yajñānam nānā bhāvān pratakvidhān vetti sarveshu bhuteshu tajñānam viddhi rājasam yattu krishna vade kasmin kārye saktamahaitukam atatvartavadalpam ca tattamasamudahritam. Action is sattvic when it is done with pure motivations. It is not accompanied by the sense of doership. It is done without any partiality or prejudice and without seeking any fruits therefrom. Rajasic action is done with egotism to satisfy desires or seeking fruits therefrom. Tamasic action comes from delusion and lack of care for others. Niyatam sangarahitam aragadveshatakritam apalaprepsuna karma yattat sattvikamukhyate yattu kamepsuna karma sahankarena va punah kriyate bahulayasam tadrajasamudahritam anubandham kshayam himsam anapekshya ca paurusham mohadarabhyate karma yattattamasamukhyate. As regards the doer, the sattvic person is free from ego and attachment, endowed with firmness and zeal, and unaffected by success or failure. The rajasic person is full of ego and attachment, oppressive by nature, desires results, and is affected by joys and sorrows. The tamasic person is lazy, uncultured, arrogant, deceitful, and often cruel. Mukta sango naham vadi dhrityut sahasamanvitah siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha karta sattvika uchyate ragi karma palapshrepsuhu lubdo himsatmako shuchihi ashasokan vidakarta rajasa parikirtitah ayukta prakrtastabdaha shatonaiskritiko lasaha vishadi dirghasutri cha karta tamasa uchyate. Action involves also the concepts of understanding, determination, and happiness. Each of these concepts is similarly characterized by the three gunas: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. The intellect, which correctly determines the path of activity and renunciation, what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, is sattvic. The intellect by which man does not truly perceive what is righteousness and what is not righteousness, what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, is rajasic. The intellect which, enveloped in ignorance, considers even unrighteousness as righteousness and sees all other things in an inverted way, is tamasic. The unwavering firmness by which a person controls through the yoga of meditation the functions of the mind, the vital air, and the senses is sattvic. The firmness by which a person holds on with extreme fondness virtues, earthly possessions, and worldly enjoyments, seeking a reward for his actions, is rajasic. The firmness by which a stupid person does not give up sleep, fear, anxiety, sorrow, and vanity is tamasic. The sattvic form of happiness is one in which the striver finds enjoyment through practice of adoration, meditation, and service to God, whereby he reaches the end of sorrow. It is the happiness born of the placidity of mind, brought about by meditation on God. It may appear like poison at first, but will be like nectar at the end. The rajasic form of happiness is one that arises from the contact of the senses with their object. It may appear like nectar at first, but will be like poison at the end. The tamasic form of happiness is one which arises from sleep, indolence, and obstinate error. It stupefies the person during both at the beginning as well as at the end. Krishna winds up the observations by stating that there is no being on earth or even among the gods in heaven or anywhere else who is free from these three gunas which are born of Prakriti. Natadasti prativyam va divi deveshu va punah sattvam prakriti jayar muktam yadhe bisyat tribil gunai. Krishna then expounds the natural functions of the four categories of persons, namely the priestly class, the warrior class, the trading class, and the laboring class. The natural duties of priestly class are the subjugation of the mind and the senses, enduring hardships for the discharge of sacred obligations, external and internal purity, forgiving the faults of others, uprightness, belief in the Vedas and other scriptures, and realization of the truth relating to God. The natural duties of the warrior class are heroism, fearlessness, firmness, diligence, and dauntlessness in battle, bestowing gifts and lordliness. The natural duties of the trading class are agriculture, rearing of cattle, and honest trade. and the service of the other classes is the natural duty of the laboring class. The Almighty God is one from whom all beings come into being and by whom the whole universe is pervaded. So, one must worship this Almighty through the performance of one's own natural duties. It is better to do one's own duty, though defective, than the duty of another, even if it is well performed, because by performing the duty ordained by his own nature, man does not incur sin. Further, one should not relinquish one's innate duty, even though it is a measure of evil, because all undertakings are beset by some defect, as is the fire covered by smoke. Thus, by devotion to his own natural duty, a person attains the highest perfection in the shape of God realization. Sve sve karmanyabhiratah samsiddhim labhate narah swakarma niratah siddhim yata vindati tashrunu yatha pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam swakarmana tamabhyarchye siddhim vindati manavah shreyan swadharmo vigunaha paradharmat swanushtitat swabhavariyatam karma kurvanna apnoti kilbisham sahajam karma kaunteje sadoshamapi natyajet sarvaramba hi doshena dhumena agnirivavritah. Now Krishna turns to the topic of renunciation. It is the sannyasa yoga, the path of knowledge. It is the supreme state of freedom from action. He whose intellect is unattached, whose thirst for enjoyment has completely disappeared, and who has subdued his mind, reaches that state through renunciation. Reaching such perfection, that person attains Brahman, which is the supreme consummation of knowledge. Asakta bhukti sarvatra jitatma vigata spriha naishkarmya siddhim paramam sannyasena gacchati siddhim prapto yatha brahma tathapnoti nibodhame samasenaiva kaunteya nishtha jnanasya japara. Krishna explains as how it is to be observed. Such a person is endowed with an untarnished intellect. He takes a light, sattvic and regulated diet. He lives in a lonely and undefiled place, having rejected sound and other objects of senses. Having controlled the mind, speech and body through firmness, he takes a resolute stand on dispassion. He gets rid of attraction and aversion and remains ever devoted to the yoga of meditation. He gives up egotism, violence, arrogance, desire, anger and luxuries. He is devoid of the feeling of mind and is tranquil at heart. In this manner, he gets qualified for oneness with the Almighty Brahman, which is truth, consciousness and bliss. Established in identity with Brahman and cheerful in mind, such a person no longer grieves nor craves for anything. Alike to all beings and through supreme devotion, he attains Brahman. Buddhya vishuddhaya yukto dhrityatmanam niyamya cha shabdadin vishayam tyaktva ragadvesho vyadusya cha viviktasevi raghvashi yatavakkajamanatah dhyanyoga paro nityam vairajyam samupashritah ahankaram balam darpam kamam krodham padigraham vimucche nirmamashanto brahma bhujaya kalpate brahmabhuta pradannatma na shochati na kankshati samasarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labhate param bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tatvatah tato mam tatvato jnatva vishate tadanantaram. Krishna then talks about those who follow the path of action. He says that the karma yogi, constantly fixing his mind on the Almighty, performs all actions with devotion. He dedicates all such actions to the Almighty and through His grace attains the eternal and imperishable state, even though performing all actions. But if from self-conceit a person does not follow this type of devoted action, he will perish. Sarvakarmanyapi sada kurvano madhyapashrayah matprasadadavapnoti shashvatam padamavyayam cetasa sarvakarmani mayi sanyasya matparah buddhiyogam upashritya macittas satatam bhava macittas sarva durgani matprasadat tarishyasi atachettvamahankaran nashroshyati pinakshasi. Now, Krishna again urges Arjuna to ponder over his duties in the light of what has been stated on the path of action. He says, Arjuna, if due to self-conceit you think that you will not fight, such a resolve will be in vain. Nature will drive you to the act, bound by your own duty, born of your nature. O Arjuna, God abides in the heart of all beings, causing them to act according to their karma. This is due to the elusive power of Maya. So, take refuge in God alone with all your heart. By His simple grace, you will attain supreme peace. This knowledge, which is more secret than all secrets, has been imparted to you by me. Now, reflect on this knowledge fully and do as you like. Yadahankaramashritya nayotsye iti manyase mityaisha vyavasayaste prakristvam niyokshati swabhavadena kaunteya nibaddhasvena karmana kartul nechasi yanmohat karishyasya vashopitat Ishvara sarva bhutanam Hriddesherjuna tishtati Brahmayan sarvabhutani yantrarudhani majaya Tameva sharanam gaccha sarvabhavena bharata Tatprasadat param shantim sthanam prapsyasi shaswatam iti te jnanam akhyātam guhyataram maya vimushyaita dasheshena yathechasi tatha kuru. Summing up the quintessence of the whole teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, here again my supreme words, the most secret of all truths. Since you are extremely dear to me, I shall give you this salutary advice for your own good. Fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, worship me, and bow down to me. By so doing, you will come to me alone. I truly promise this to you, since you are exceptionally dear to me. Giving up all your duties to me, the all-powerful and all-supporting Lord, take refuge in me alone. I shall absolve you of all sins. Do not worry at all. Sarvaguhye tamam bhuyah shrunu me paramam vachah ishtosi me dhridamiti tato vakshyami te hitam manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyajimam namaskuru mame vaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarvapapebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchah. Krishna further states, the person who listens to this holy Gita with devotion, being free from malice, will be liberated from sin and shall reach the blessed spheres attained by men of righteous deeds. Adyeshyate chaya imam dharmyam samvadamavayo jnanayajnena tenaham ishtasyam niti me matihi shraddhavan anasuyascha shrunuyat apiyo naraha sobimukta shubhan lokan prapnuyat punyakarmanam. Then he asks Arjuna, and O Arjuna, have you listened to this attentively? Has your delusion born of ignorance been destroyed? Kaschideta shrutam parthe tvayaiకాగ్రేణ chetasa kaschidajnana sammohaha pranashtaste dhananjaya. Arjuna then replies that by the grace of Krishna, his delusion has been destroyed, that he has gained the wisdom, that he is free from all doubts, and that he will engage in battle as per the bidding of Krishna. The conversation between Krishna and Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita ends here. Telling King Dhritarashtra this mysterious and thrilling conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, Sanjaya says, recalling often that sacred and mystic conversation, I rejoice again and again. Remembering also again and again that most wonderful form of Sri Krishna, Great is my wonder, and I rejoice again and again. Wherever there is Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and wherever there is Arjuna, fortune, victory, glory, and unfailing righteousness will surely be there. Such is my conviction. Ityaham vasudevasya partasya cha mahatmanah samvadamimam shosham adbhutam romaharshanam vyasaprasada shrutavan etad guhyamaham param yogam yogeshwarat krishnat sakshat katayata swayam rajan samsmrutya samsmrutya samvadamimam adbhutam keshavarjunayo punyam rishyami ca muhurmuhum tacca samsmrutya samsmrutya rupamadhyadbhutam hare vismayo me mahan rajan hrishyami ca punah punah yatra yogeshwara krishno yatra partho dhanurdharah tatra shrir vajayo bhutihi dhruva nitir matir mama.